Hi, good morning. Good morning, Manohar.
Good morning, Nija.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, Saptarshi. Good morning, Professor Don.
Good morning, folks. Nice to see you all.
Likewise.
Very excited to see you. And so we've all like read your books. So I have one copy of one of your books right here. So I mean, this is just amazing to have you. Thank you for taking out the time and meeting with us. And I think we have gotten a lot of audience for this panel discussion, and I hope they all gained from this discussion. We also have two co-panelists with you. So I'll just introduce them as well. So we have, so I'll just start with huh? Like, so it's like live, right? Everyone is there. Oh, okay. Why is it here? नहीं, इतना नहीं है. Okay. So I think we use that. Sure. Okay, so dear all, just a very warm welcome to the pre-event of this 1Pixel Design Conference. It's an annual design conference which is held by the Department of Human-Centered Design at IIT Delhi. I'm Dr. Richa Gupta, and I'm currently the head of Human-Centered Design Department here at IIT Delhi. And I'm also an assistant professor here, and I teach inclusive design and accessibility along with prototyping methodology. So it's an honor to moderate today's panel discussion featuring the legendary Professor Don Norman, alongside our esteemed panelist Manohar Swaminathan and Saptarshi Prakash. Together, we'll explore some groundbreaking ideas in design, human-centered innovation, and the future of our work in the field. This is a pre-event, which is part of the main 1Pixel Design Conference on 4th and 5th January. And this is a unique way for us to organize and kind of have some curtain raiser discussions about it. So I'll just introduce the panelists, and I think Professor Don Norman doesn't need any detailed introduction. We all know him. So he's a renowned design thinker, cognitive scientist, and the author of The Design of Everyday Things, being the most popular book alongside a lot of other books related to design methodology, design psychology, and other aspects of design thinking. He's a pioneer of user-centered design. He transforms how we create intuitively and functional products. And he continues to guide designers and innovators worldwide, and it's a pleasure to have you. He's also co-founder and board member of the Nielsen Norman Group. Secondly, we have Saptarshi joining us today, Saptarshi Prakash. He's an engineer turned product designer from IIT Madras. He's currently Assistant Vice President and Director of Design at Swiggy, which is a very well-known consumer-related application-based company here in India. And he has delivered 3 TEDx talks and over 100 other talks and workshops. He also is a leading voice in design, startups, and creativity in India. Just to add, he has a lot of social media following as well, especially from design students and around the country. Thirdly, we have Mr. Manohar Swaminathan, who's also a good friend and collaborator. He's a senior principal researcher at Microsoft Research India, specializing in accessibility in the global south. Co-founded startups like Strand Life Sciences and Pico Pita Simputers. He's also co-invented the Simputer focusing on assistive technologies, VR and AR and IoT. He's a former ISC Bangalore faculty member recognized for innovation and academic entrepreneurship. Thank you all for joining us for this panel discussion. And today, the theme is around, how India is witnessing a transition of acceptance around design thinking, both in the industry as well as in academia, and how this will actually translate into a shift in the outcomes of both academia and industry, right? So just to kickstart the discussion, so basically how India, so I would like you to, I would just like to throw some ideas and some, aspects of our theme onto our panelists just to, bounce off what their opinions are on it. So, one of the first thoughts are that India has a legacy of design and is deeply rooted in its diverse cultural and regional traditions. So, how can India balance its rich Indian cultural heritage with modern design trends to create a unique and globally recognized design identity? So, if Professor Don Norman, you would like to share some thoughts about this.
Well, thank you for those informative and long introductions. The one thing I will not do is tell you what you should do, because my firm belief in design is that when we are designing for communities, it has to come from the people themselves, from the community, and you don't want an outsider like me coming in and telling you what you should do. I did spend 3 weeks in India in, I think it was September, just a few months ago, going to a number of design schools. 3 weeks is not enough to go to all the important design schools. So many of my friends wrote to me and said, "Why aren't you coming to us?" And it'll have to be another trip. But in those talks, I went particularly to design schools that were not doing traditional design, that were trying to find their own way. And personally, that's, I think, what is needed, that we should not go back to the indigenous days. We should not go back to the old materials and designs that we did in the 1700s, the 1800s, even the early 1900s, because we are living now in the 21st century. But I believe that every country and every community ought to be designing for themselves, for the people who live there, and retaining the culture. And what will emerge will be, well, if it's done by Indians, it will be called Indian design. And if it's done, I got asked this by a bunch of young Mexican designers. They said, "What shall we do to introduce Mexican design to the world?" And I said, they were in Hong Kong at the time when I was talking to them. And I said, "You should go back to Mexico and do brilliant, wonderful work." And guess what? As your work becomes known, that will be called Mexican design. And that's kind of what I recommend for you. Don't try to mimic the past. Don't try to mimic the Western world. Do what you think is important for where you live. And India is a big enough country. You don't have to worry about selling to exterior markets. But believe me, if you were successful in India, the exterior markets would want to buy what was being made in India.
Yeah, I think thank you for your thoughts on this, Professor Don. Would other panelists would like to share their opinions on the, yeah?
Okay, let me go next. Just think it's a very important question about how to leverage and benefit from the rich Indian cultural heritage. And absolutely on the mark what Don said about it has to evolve from the population which is going to use it. Just aside on the way I look at design, I like play. I like play, and the methodology we defined at Microsoft Research, I call it the ludic design for accessibility, where we put play at the center of everything. And in extended and joyful play, the players gain skills as a side effect. So the play is central. The effect, the gain of skills is a side effect. And I like play because play is so ancient in human culture, and play is evolved independently across the world. Every culture has their own play. Every culture can define this is the game that nobody else plays, but there may be other people playing the same thing, independently evolved. So if we design with play at the center, it will obviously and automatically, in my naive view, maybe capture the local cultural values, and eventually, when it is joyful, the product or solution you are trying to build is going to be adopted. And if it is rooted in the play that you are familiar with, you have played when you are young, I think that's, in my view, the way to kind of micro-localize design. So I'll stop there.
And when you came to the design lab in San Diego and talked about ludic design, that was attractive to the audience. That was something new to everybody, that, oh, ludic is this funny term. Nobody knew what it meant. But yes, it basically means enjoyment, games, playing. And that could be, it's not reserved for what we call video games. It's reserved for everyday life.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, and I think just the word ludic is from the philosopher using, he wrote a book called Homo Ludens. Essentially, he believed that Homo sapiens is okay, but Homo Ludens is a better description of humans because we are humans because we play, and we play because we are humans. I think that's a powerful thing which has just grabbed me since the time I read the book, and that's what I've been focusing on when I think about design.
But part of what you're saying is when you talk about playing and designing for playing, you're really talking about designing for a quality of life. And I think that the Western world has perverted the entire world by its emphasis on designing for money, designing for profit, designing for business. Now, I don't mind designing for business, but I want the businesses to think about quality of life for their employees, for the places where they are located, and for the people who purchase their products. And ludic is one good example.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe I'd like to add a bit. What really struck me was what Sir Don had said, like, don't have to follow what West is doing. Now, this reminds me, I was in a tier 2 city in Gujarat, India, a while back. I was just visiting some friends, but then, I always keep chatting with people about design. And I was talking to this lady, and she was telling me how much she loved one particular restaurant and how often she ordered food from that restaurant. Of course, food conversations are close to my heart because part of my job is designing for food delivery, which Swiggy does. So she kept raving about this restaurant, but then she also rated 1 star to each of those restaurants. That led me to thinking, why is it 1 star? And after a bit of conversation, I realized that she thought giving 1 star was the best rating that she could do in a 5-point rating system, because it goes well with the Indian way of saying that this is number 1, or ye ek number ka hai. That's how we refer to something which is really great. So someone like me, who's sitting out in a metro city, would never understand, because a 5-point rating system is so damn accepted. But then we never question, like, is it the right way of taking ratings? Does everyone understand it? Is it culturally relevant for everyone? Right? So I couldn't agree more with Sir when he said that we are probably barely scratching the surface of what designing for India could be like. We are catering to maybe the top 1% of India who are English educated, well educated, exposed to the Western world. So whatever was done in the West, if we just mimic a part of it, it starts working. But then when we start talking about real India, which is way beyond that 1%, the game totally changes.
I've been in some of the real India. In fact, it's this last trip I visited a hospital. On my earlier trip, I visited a hospital that I thought was one of the most modern and best equipped and best run hospitals that I've experienced in the world. And it was giving basically free heart surgery to Indians. But the one I visited recently was very poor. The patients were all complaining that the doctors were rude, that the people, they came in and did things to them without explaining, and then they ran away. They never asked for permission. They didn't say what they were doing. The same with the nurses and so on. And we had a long discussion about why were doctors so rude, but actually we went and talked to the doctors. And the doctors said they hated what they were doing. They didn't want to be rude, but they were under supported. They didn't have enough staff. They were rushed from one place to another. And so what it appeared to be rudeness was simply the only way they could get through their job. And it was very hard on the doctors. Many were depressed. Many would quit. Many would commit suicide. And India is a mixed country with extremely wealthy people and extremely poor people. And the two hospitals illustrate that difference. The excellent hospital, because it was funded by very wealthy people, and so they were able to afford to do wonderful care and not charge for it. Whereas the poor one was funded by the government, and basically they had not enough money, not enough space, not enough staff. But India is learning how to manage this and learning how to do this. And that's actually needed all around the world, because when we design things in the West, we assume technology is, it's always available. There's always electricity, there's always good water, there's always air conditioning, there's always this, there's always that. And so when we take the American things or the European things and bring it to Africa, Latin America, the inner parts of India, not the big cities, but the inner parts, it doesn't work. Or maybe it works for a while. So there are lots of innovators, though, who are saying, well, look, we can build these advanced medical tools, for example, and other tools that don't require air conditioning or don't require always having power or don't require all this water. And that actually can also be very important for the entire world. Once you do that, then guess what? The Americans will buy it too, because in our homes, we can't, the technology is always breaking. And we build things that work without the technology, it's better. One of the things we've lost is how do we build buildings for very hot weather? In the olden days, there are some wonderful buildings in India that were built with very thick walls, made sure that there weren't windows facing where the sun was coming in. And and they built wind tunnels, a wind tower inside the building so that air would come in the bottom, and then as it heated up, it would rise to the top, but that would cause a breeze to go all the way straight up, and it would ventilate the entire building. And that was also done in the Middle East. And then with the advent of technology, we don't need to worry about that. We can make all glass buildings. It doesn't matter which direction they face, because we'll just have air conditioning. Well, air conditioning not only is not always available, but it is a disaster for the planet. Because air conditioning, first of all, it takes heat from the building and puts it outside. But it actually, because nothing is completely efficient, it puts more heat into the atmosphere than it removes from the building. And where does the energy come from to run the air conditioners? Well, it's usually coal burning or oil burning power plants, which is raising the temperature of the world. And so it's time, when I said we shouldn't go back to the old habits, actually, I'm not completely correct about that. We should go back to the old habits that didn't destroy the environment. Old habits where there are things that we could learn from them and apply them in today's world. By the way, my name is Don. Not Sir Don, please, or not Professor Don, just Don.
Got it, Don.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. So, just to bounce off one more aspect of this question, so I think everyone shared like why or how we can, customize or design for Indian audience, and I really love the story about, how a 5-point Likert scale is probably something which is not, globally known and things like that. But unfortunately, many of our products are being designed or are being owned by global companies, such as Google products or Microsoft products, which are kind of have that top-down approach because they are not really connected to a large number of audiences at a global level, not just India, other countries also. Should is it sustainable or profitable to cater and customize to different audiences? So, for example, if we take an example of a very global product, which is like a Google Maps application, for example, right? So, is it reasonable, profitable, and sustainable to customize something like that for different audiences, depending on their cultural, connotations, expectations, and their sensibilities related to interaction design? Or rather, let the audience reach and learn how to use that one product?
Well, that's an interesting example you gave us because a good friend of mine, Lalatesh, who is Indian and lives in Bangalore, Bengaluru, is a person who developed Google Maps for India. He's one of the co-founders of Google India, and he thought that it would be very useful to have good maps, but the company said no, we can't do that. It's too expensive, and there aren't any really good maps to begin with. And so what he did was crowdsource it. He asked the Indians to provide the information, crowdsourcing where the streets should be and where the intersections were and where the lights were and where the traffic hurdles were, et cetera. So it helped create Google Maps for India, and it was developed by Indians in India. So, and that I think has been very useful for everyone because it doesn't just tell you how to drive your car, it also gives you walking paths and bicycle paths and other information that's very valuable. And we do live in an interconnected world, and we do many things that go across the world, but it isn't just Western companies that do this. Look at Tata Industries. Take Jaguar, the famous British car. Well, who owns Jaguar? I believe it's Tata, isn't it? Who owns Land Rover? Actually, that may be China. I'm not sure whether it's China or it's Tata. But a lot of the so India can also play its role in the worldwide manufacturing. But the other thing that's happening is that you take a look at the crowded streets and the driving in India, and the wide variety of vehicles that are used, and most of them are driven by gasoline engines. In fact, that is harmful to everybody. And they're noisy, they're dirty, they pollute the atmosphere. Well, there are lots of startups in India that are developing inexpensive electrically driven rickshaws, electric driven taxis, electric driven these, what do they call the three-wheeled vehicles that go back and forth? I rode one the other day when I was in Mumbai, just for the fun of it. I wanted to understand what it felt like inside. But it's very effective in getting inexpensive transportation across the city. But what is nice about electric motors and batteries is people can build it for themselves. It's much easier to do than internal combustion engines, and it's better for everybody. And there are lots of things that India could lead the world in, because I have a feeling that once that gets caught up, the world is going to want those as well, and they'll come from India.
I think if I may add to the auto story, Design is also not just about the externality or the appearance, as every one of us understands. An example in this field is a company called Sedimac at IIT Mumbai, founded company. It's about 20 plus years old, deep tech company, which has made remarkable gains in the ignition control of two-wheelers. And that is essentially making gasoline-powered two-wheelers way better than they used to be. And they're also using it to control electric vehicles as well. So the point I want to make is, when you talk about digital products like Google Maps and Amazon stores and so on, those are digital experiences which were created by the pioneers in that field. And so they will diffuse that product across the population. People will adopt it, adapt it as they need it. There's no need to train people on using WhatsApp, for example. 300 million people use it. Nobody ran a course on WhatsApp. It is useful to them, they will use it. And the company will evolve the product, including local language interfaces, text input, all of that, to gather more and more of it. But design has to be, the education of design should be about creating new products, new experiences from ground up, which don't exist today. I think that's where India can make a huge difference, because innovation exists across the landscape of India, very small pockets. And with the globally connected world that Don mentions, it is very a big opportunity to convert those ideas into globally useful products. But again, you can't build a product somewhere else. For your local environment, you have to make a product that succeeds, and then the success will grow. So, sorry, to answer your primary question, that's not really the question to ask. It's about the usage of a product will drive how it evolves. And if it is successfully managed, the product will evolve to great heights. If not, it will fail, right? So let me stop that.
Yeah, I think since we were talking about Google Maps, right? And what motivation do these big international corporates have to fix some of those things? I feel at times the key lies in understanding what the real challenge is, what the real problem is. In fact, I was reading about Google Maps the other day. Like everywhere in the Western world, the way wayfinding or directions work is based on some well-defined name that the roads have. Head east in street number 4, and then take a right after 200 meters. But that's not how we do wayfinding, do we? Our roads do have well-defined names, but then no one refers to them with that name. It's like always that Hanuman Mandir Road is how we refer to it, even though the official name could be Fourth Cross Road. Nobody knows it. And then it's never, in 200 meters. Sure it is, but then no one can measure it that way. It's about take a left turn near the HDFC Bank ATM. So at times, I think it's about identifying those nuances. And I feel since we were talking about Google Maps, they beautifully did it. They understood that this is the problem. So without changing anything major in the Google Map UI itself, they added these small tweaks, and magically it just starts working for India, because that's how we do our wayfinding. So I feel happy to see.
It wasn't magic.
Yeah.
It wasn't magic. It was done because it was done by Indians who knew what they needed. So
Right.
if you say magic, then that says, well, designers don't do magic. Okay, but by working with the people that we're designing for, as you point out, yes, magically it seems like it's designed just for us. Well, it was designed just for us because it was designed by us.
Right.
Yes, I couldn't resist this lighter vein. In Bangalore, when you ask a passerby direction, he will say, go straight, but you have to observe carefully the bend of the hand. Otherwise, there will be a fork here. You take it, you have to observe carefully. And you'll say straight. If he stretches the word, it's longer than go straight. And so all of this has to be observed before you can get the direction, right? So this nuances. I'm sorry, this was like
No, I think these are very interesting aspects, and I think that brings us to the question as to few things which Manohar also mentioned and Don also mentioned, and Saptarshi, that considering they are these specific set of challenges, how can we train our designers, young designers, engineers, innovators, as part of academia to have that eye for nuance.
Yes, well, actually, one of the things that I think a lot of design schools train that. They train you, first of all, to be curious, and second of all, to look at the world differently. And I often complain that design is not art, and it's a mistake to have design in an art school because we're different. However, one of the important things that artists learn as a learning art is how to look at the world and observe it, see it, and understand it. And that skill is also necessary for designers.
Here I will quote from Dawn's website on their lab. Okay, as you know, the Design Lab at UCSD has strong foundations in cognitive sciences department that Dawn founded many years ago. And I was looking at the cognitive sciences description. It had people in background in philosophy, linguists. There were people, philosophers, linguists, psychologists, computer scientists, anthropologists, sociologists, and neuroscientists to investigate the nature of human intelligence, learning, and adaptation, all part of understanding of what it means to be human. I think that is missing in most academia in India, especially in the design community. We have made a huge progress in connecting technology with design, but connecting design with humanity, all of these specialities is what we need to start looking at, especially.
So that's an advertisement for this, yes? And so there are two different themes I'd like to be able to talk about. One of them was what was the title of the session, actually, which was design is worthless by itself. I've been saying this over and over again because a design is a plan. It's only valuable when it's actually done. And so we have to get designers out in the world actually in charge not only of the plans and the designing, but the actual building of it, the implementation, whether it's a sewerage system, whether it's a taxi system, whether it's, well, Google Maps, whatever it is. Because if you're not there, first of all, you don't understand what really is required for the design. And second of all, if you turn it over to other people to do, they'll mess it up. And it won't be their fault. It's because it doesn't meet their requirements, so they have to change it. And if you had worked with them while you were designing, they wouldn't have had to change it. And so we really have to, I think it's a mistake that we separate the design of something from the building, creating, manufacturing. And the other thing is that, well, I go around now saying this book, which is well known, is wrong. And I've been teaching from it for many years, and I still teach from it. Because what is wrong in the book? Nothing. I still believe in it. What is wrong is what is not in the book. And what is not in the book is exactly the sort of things we're talking about. It's how design can impact cultures and societies, and how we're destroying the environment, and how we're destroying native cultures and countries' cultures. We're trying to make it all the same, which is basically all based in Europe or the West. But European countries include countries like the United States, Australia. So European countries don't have to be in Europe. So the notion of Western countries is actually not a geographical term. But one of the problems also we're facing is that almost every design school in India and every major design school in the world started with people trained in European design. And so even though it's being done by Indians today, they follow the standard international traditions. And on the one hand, that isn't necessarily wrong or bad, but because of what the work it has done is good. But what it has lost is the power and wonders of the differences among cultures and countries. So that brings all these topics together because it meshes with the first topic and with the two topics that I was promised we would discuss during this panel.
If I just add a bit to it, yeah, I think I agree with it. What I see is people or designers often try to fix things with existing patterns, things which they might have learned in school. I think we should promote a more open culture where people focus more on going to the core of the problem rather than, aligning it with something they might have read in the past. Uh, because uh, uh, because every problem can be unique once you're in the world, and it needs us first principles thinking to get to the actual reason why the problem is happening in the first place. So I think we should promote more such open-ended thinking.
Oh, yes, but oh boy, now we get to the problem of academics and teaching. I also visited a bunch of primary schools, and what children are taught is to listen to the teacher and to repeat it back. And they even learn to shout it back, all in unison. Everybody now, boom, boom, boom. No wonder that when you actually become a professional, many of them have lost their notion of originality. They look to see what the authorities are saying and they repeat it, or they look to see what someone else has done and they repeat it. And so we have to change the educational system. And when I say that, I believe this is true across the world. It certainly is true in the United States. And one of the problems we also have is if you look at the best universities in the United States, or say the IITs of India, all the good universities want to be research universities, and they want to hire the very best professors in the world. And in order to have the very best, come on, there aren't enough very best people unless you make the areas so small and so specialized that there's few people in it. So the best way to be the best person in a field is to be the only person in the field. But that means that the fields are very specialized, and that the professors spend a lot of their time writing papers to be published in journals that are only read by other professors. The world doesn't even know about them, and that has not helped the world. And so I think we've lost the notion of people who have broad knowledge across a wide variety of disciplines, people who know how to build and create things. Building and creating doesn't get you promoted in academics anymore because you have to publish in these journals. And I really think the educational system has to change.
Yeah. And even just to extend the question and just add my opinion on it. So even in research, when we are publishing or all of those, the evaluation metrics, the benchmarking, all of that is also not tailored across cultural connotations, but rather very globally set, and rather most of them are being set by Western experts and pioneers.
Yes, because you have to get letters, don't you, from people from the West.
It's a perpetuation cycle, right? Because the top conferences are managed, organized by people in the top universities in the world, and which are all in the West. And so faculty in Indian institutions need papers in those conferences to get promoted in India, which is a tragedy. And so you write so that it is accepted in those conferences. Essentially, the whole design world, technology world is being filtered through the very narrow views of the power centers, which are the
Yes.
ones which own the IP of all the technologies in the world. So,
and I've stopped going to these conferences because they're deadly, dull.
So I think the way to break out is, I think we can go down a rabbit hole of these huge problems, but I think the positive thing that is happening, I see in India, is that people are starting to think about design, which was not possible 5-6 years ago. In Indian education system, after high school, they think about engineer, lawyer, doctor, and maybe MBA. There's no design is for the frivolous and the rich who are just playing around. I mean, they are fluffy. Nothing is, and there's not even an undergraduate program in design 15 years ago, because design was not considered important. Now that landscape has changed, and we are having actually a panel discussion on design, which is like really the sign of times, that people are trying to understand that beyond the basics, design as a discipline is becoming important. So I think we need to build on that momentum, but understand that design is, I like the term, the newer term Don introduced, human-centered design, but it evolves to humanity-centered design.
Humanity, yes.
Humanity-centered design. I love the place where we want to go, from users, which is like commercial, to human-centered, but not just one human, but humanity as a whole. So I would say, let's put energies into bringing a holistic approach to design from where we are. If we, including in the school level, right? Those are the things that I think Don needs to do some, what shall I say, high-level lobbying, because people will listen when Don says, yeah, design is critical from a primary school level. You build things, you solve your problems around your school. Doesn't mean something to you. And I think introducing that at the school level, which I would say is really play. Solving problems is play. And can we do this? I think, Don, I would look for you to make some strong push towards introducing design at the primary school level.
Yeah.
It is actually being done. There's a surprisingly large number of primary schools that are teaching, because design is a way of thinking and of building and creating, and children love it. And I think design is a way of thinking that can be applied to almost anything in life.
And just to add, actually, in India itself, the new education policy, that NEP 2020, that has recognized design thinking as a lateral curriculum program, and it has already been introduced in middle school classes as a lateral program at school level. And there is also something called Atal Tinkering Labs. I'm not sure whether so just to share it with the panel and the rest of the participants. It's called Atal Tinkering Labs, which has some prototyping machines and material and equipment, and students can go and build something which they have ideated or thought about.
Yes. Another good thing I've learned is that the Indian government in primary schools, maybe both primary and secondary, is advocating, I forget the term they used, but what I call activity-based learning or problem-based learning, because when you learn mathematics or arithmetic, and then you learn science, and then you learn, I don't know, spelling, and then you learn some history, you don't know why you're learning it. And it doesn't relate to you. And what is nice, if you work on a problem, a real problem, maybe that's in the city where you're living or even in the school system, then you have to bring all these things together. You need some mathematics, and you need to understand design, and you need to understand this, that, and the other, and you learn how they all fit together. And somebody can even bring philosophy into it and ethics, because is this really right to do? Are we doing harm? And by doing that, first of all, the students, it makes more sense to them. They learn it better. They enjoy it. And second of all, it's also better education, because it's education that can be applied in the real world, which actually gets to the other point you wanted to talk about. Design shouldn't be separated from doing, because the whole point about design is to apply it in the world. And if you're not doing that, then you're missing a lot. You're doing things wrong often. And design schools ought to do that too. Now, we also build models in design, but they're playthings. They're what we call, well, you build simple elementary things, and you work on simple elementary projects simply because the school system is divided arbitrarily into semesters or quarters or classes that meet 3 times a week or 1 hour a day every week or every day. But this isn't the way you learn. This is not the way real learning takes place. It's amazing. Children hate arithmetic, but ask them about cricket games or football, and they'll know the scores and they'll know what they mean, and they'll do the arithmetic on all the game statistics of the players.
So we have a few questions from some participants in the audience. I would like to share one of them, which seems quite interesting and in line with the conversation that we are already having. Of course, we all agree that successful design execution requires coming together of all stakeholders, like school educators, higher education systems, policymakers, as well as industry. But with the advent of emerging technologies like AI and augmented reality and 3D printing, revolutionizing this, the global design field, how would you think that something like these new technologies are reshaping India's or global design ecosystem, or methodologies affecting methodologies, and how can we as educators leverage that to teach better, and the students can leverage that to learn better?
I use AI every day. I like the fact that when I need to know something, I can ask it. I can tell it the question that I'm asking, and the answer, the kind of answer I'm looking for, instead of what we've learned to do and search is that we have to figure out, oh, how do I get to the website that might give me the answer? Instead, we ask for the answer. And I mean, I had a discussion just this morning with somebody about hearing, about why is it when you put on earphones, you hear the sound of music or whatever you're listening to inside your head instead of outside in the world. And the answer has to do with the way the ears work. And in order to put on earphones and hear the sound up here where it's coming from, you have to change the sounds. See my ear? Everybody's ear has these funny notches and funny panel, holes and ridges, and everybody's ear is slightly different shape. Well, when a sound hits the ear, then high frequencies are changed. Some of the high frequencies don't make it through, or some of them are delayed, or some of them are amplified, or some of them are diminished. And that's how you can tell whether something's in front of you or in back of you or above. And if you take the sound and you put it into earphones, that has been treated as if it hit the ears, then guess what? The sound is coming from all around you. Well, in order to explain that, I discovered ChatGPT did a fantastic job of explaining it and explaining the history. So I think that these are going to be wonderful supplements to education, for example. There are already people trying to use it as personal tutors. And they might also be a way of tutoring a lot of the design concepts that we have to do and the design problems. And they will change our world. They will change the way we do things. But every new technology has done that. In the end, it has made us better. And I think we teach that. 3D printing is another really interesting example. For the first time, we can actually make these really complicated things in our home, because you can build your own 3D printer and print your own things. And they're inexpensive, but you can build things that can't be built in any other way. And quite often, things in my house break and I need some little exotic part and it's hard to find. Well, with 3D printing, I could just make it. And maybe the service divisions of companies will simply put on their websites the 3D printing instruction I feed into my 3D printer, or maybe the one in the corner. Maybe the little stores will have 3D printers and they can make little parts for me. And I think if you think about the positive value of all of these, we tend to emphasize the negative of these. But if you think of the positive one, I think it will enrich in our lives in powerful ways.
Yeah, I think all these tools keep evolving, but the fundamental question is, how are we using the tools? If we are using the tools to continue to do the wrong things that we have been doing with old tools, we are not going to gain, we are going to do worse. For example, maybe a trivial example is if we start using the power of generative AI and say, I want to score higher in JEE, that's a ridiculous use of new tech. JEE should be banned in my view, but it will lose its significance because people are going to understand engineering, programming without having to go through this complicated exams and programs in BE, CS, and so forth.
Well, actually, I think that we should change the exam. Look, teachers are complaining, oh, when we used to assign essays, now they just have the AI write it. And I'm saying, well, why should you be assigning essays?
Exactly.
That's not what they're going to do in their lives. And I say, look, if I'm in a company and my boss asks me to write a paper on what does the word transformer mean in GPT, I don't know. Well, I can't say I don't know to my boss. What I'm supposed to do is find somebody who does know and copy what they know. And you wrote a paper on it. Can I use these 2 paragraphs? Or here's a paper. Yeah. And the only thing is, we should say where we got the material from, because I'm putting it together in a unique way. I'm taking from all these different sources, but I'm putting it together in a unique way that my boss will understand and other people at my company will understand. And why don't we train that in school? That's how the world works. And so we should encourage. I have a paper called In Defense of Cheating. We ought to let people cheat, except in school it's not allowed, and therefore you have to lie. And since I'm going to encourage it, I'm going to say, if you take something from somebody else, you have to tell me who you took it from, because I will give you a grade on did you say something that would made sense? Did it really fit in what you're trying to say? And if you get a good grade, I'll give that person part of your good grade.
Yes, I think the change that we need in the education system is to focus on problem solving.
Yes.
Problem solving, if that is the foundational skill, any new technology will observe to use to solve the problem that you used to solve with some earlier tool. But fundamentally, the focus should be on problem solving from the simplest to the most complex. And our
It's not
curriculum
quite
will be.
problem solving, because one thing that designers are good at is problem finding.
I agree. I agree. So the school level, you start with, hey, find the problem that you see when you come to school and how do you fix it, right? I agree completely. Problem identification, problem understanding, and problem solving iteratively. You may not understand the problem at first glance. You think you understand, you go with the solution and say, oh, this is not the real problem. This other thing is the problem. So focusing on problem identification, thanks, Don. Identification, understanding, solving iteratively is the
And one more thing,
focus.
and the teacher is not telling you what to do. And in fact, the teacher may not even know what to do, because the teacher is going to learn along with you. What the teacher will do is help you learn, help you discover the sources, and then critique. Critique means in a positive way, the work that you are creating. And so the role of a teacher has to change. And that's the teachers, today, the teachers don't know how to do that. How many teachers stand up in front of the class and say, I don't know? Or how many teachers do something on the board and say, oh, that's wrong? I do it. It's a shock to students when they first see that happen, but actually they come to enjoy it. And I like it when somebody tells me I'm wrong. And I explain to the students why. Because first of all, if I'm wrong, I want to know about it. And second of all, I may not be wrong. You try to convince me, and I may decide that I am right, but it means that I haven't been teaching it right.
I think as a teacher, it's easiest to say that, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to help you learn this, because that takes away all the pressure. You don't have to be the wise Lord sitting there knowing everything. You say, no, I don't know. I'm trying to learn with you. Let's solve this problem. And
Well, actually, when the teachers that do this love it when they learn how to do it. It makes their jobs more enjoyable.
Exactly. Joy. I think that's finally both teaching and learning should be is about joy.
It's called ludic teaching.
Completely agree. Saptarishi, do you have something to add about
Yeah,
this?
I was just enjoying the conversation, and I think I heard many topics and terms being used, and maybe I can add a bit around what AI would do. What I feel is AI would do some of the things on my behalf so that I can focus on problem supporting, problem solving, and do the things that I love. So I would want to see AI doing that. I think the entire conversation summarized it pretty well.
So I would like to bring another question from one of the participants.
What happened to Swami?
I, I think he's still online, but he's maybe so.
Okay.
What advice do you have for emerging designers to navigating an increasingly complex technological and social landscape? And a follow-up question in the same domain, that as young designers, we often encounter two paths, the technical and theoretical aspects, widely acknowledged and prioritized in academia, and the human-centered aspects involving deeper connections with people and the problems they face. How should we prioritize and progress in these areas and actually gain the intuition and experience?
The problem with asking the question that way is it sounds like
You
you
have
have to
to
make a
choose
choice.
one. Actually, you
Yeah,
have to do both.
exactly.
Yes.
No, but that's one of the challenges. Design sounds simple when you describe it. It's not, because we have to balance so many, many different things, including all the comments you just made. But in addition, if you're working for a company, you're going to have to balance the budget. You're going to have a certain amount of money you're allowed to spend and a certain amount of time that you're given. And your team may not have all the expertise that is needed. And your team may not be big enough to do all the what you want to do. And you have to learn how to balance that. Because in the real world, everything is connected to everything. And so the world itself, it isn't that the world has suddenly become complex. It has always been complex. It's just that in the past we used to oversimplify it, and we would make things, therefore, that in many ways did harm. They might have solved one problem, but they might have harmed all sorts of other things while they were solving the one problem, like harming the environment and harming people's cultures, and also, well, wrecking the economic system of the world. And so the good designer has to learn how to balance that and bring it all together. And so we have two real designers here. I want to hear from them. Maybe three, if I include you.
So I think the point of being the students and the younger designers taking it to be becoming more complex is because of the fact that earlier we did not have access to so much information at all times in our daily lives. So when you are you when you have easy access to so much global information, global challenges, that's also an asset, but it's also cognitive overload many a times, and it almost confuses many of young engineers and young designers, and they feel that it's so complex, what to do, what to choose, kind of attitude emerges. So probably Swami and Manohar and Saptarishi can also comment and think.
But just I can't resist. If you in this phase while you're designing, if you aren't at some point completely confused, completely at a loss to know how to balance all these different things, and thinking that this time I'm going to fail, et cetera, it's not going to work out. If that does not happen, then you are doing it wrong. Because what happens is you struggle, and you go through, and it's the best designs come when you have no idea what you're doing, and maybe sometimes you quit. And then maybe a month later, something pops into your mind in the middle of the night or something, and there's your solution, because the brain is working on all those complexities. But I personally think that it's one of the things that I've talked to many, many designers, and I'll ask the panel here, that do you ever give up? Do you ever think that this is I've failed now? But later on, you suddenly think of a whole new way of viewing it, and it comes together.
So thanks,
I see.
Don, for calling me a designer. I'm actually an engineer of the old school. Engineering was meant to be building things and solutions that improve people's lives. That includes all the optimizations you mentioned. It is not science, which is an abstraction we can solve precisely. Engineering is only intervene and hope that it gets things better. Maybe something else which you didn't foresee is getting worse, just like the environment. And so understanding all the constraints is what an engineer is supposed to do. And we have become so specialized, breaking them into electrical, mechanical, specialized buckets, that this holistic approach of solving, understanding an original problem is getting lost. And I think that's really where we need to come back to look at the system as a whole. And the question about the complexity of information available is, it's all there. But at a given point, you're trying to look at something, and generative AI is so good at giving you answers for the specific situation you are in. It doesn't matter what else exists. You have a roadblock. And if you can define what the roadblock is, you can ask questions and clarify on that context rather than worrying about, oh, all of this is there, what am I going to do, right? So I would say the power of Gen AI is in not having to know everything about anything. You just go there with the passion to understand and solve something, and anything you need, you can find out and then dive deeper.
Yeah, if I were to add a bit to what Vishnu had asked here in the question, right? He has mentioned about two journeys. One is probably the theoretical and the academic way which is taught, and the other one is in a professional context. And it feels like two different paths, and often it could be. But what I've observed in whatever little experience I have is when we encounter such things, I tend to go by the professional context, what you have referred to as professional context. I try to understand, what is happening out there, and it might make me feel that, hey, all the theory that I might have learned in school is if meaningless because I'm not able to apply them, and it's all jugaad that I'm doing. Jugaad is a very popular Indian word, as you know. But often it has happened. In some cases, it is true, but often it has happened that maybe years later, when I just sit and reflect, it makes me feel that, hey, what I thought as jugaad was actually not. I had unknowingly applied some of the theories that I learned in college. It's just that when I was learning, maybe I didn't do a good job at knowing or understanding the theory well enough, which might have made me feel that what I have encountered at my job in professional context is way off. That's probably not. Over the years, as I keep switching between my academic theory and my practical job that I do, these switches makes me understand the theory even better. So years later, I can actually map the theory that I applied unknowingly. So that's what I have observed, but would love to know your thoughts as well.
Well, actually, on the same lines, just a week back, I received an email from my student who took my course 3 years back. That I was at a talk recently and I realized that most of which was being discussed at this talk was taught in the course. And I had this, over the course of my work in the company, I've realized I've to appreciate the course and the material and the way you taught it more. And sorry, I didn't appreciate it then. So, so I mean, I think that's very common, and I also a lot of times felt that when I was taking the course, at school or at my undergrad level, didn't appreciate it at that time, but maybe eventually you realize the depths of it, the meaning of it, and how to translate that theoretical knowledge into application, probably. So probably Dawn can also comment into how we can, encourage or enable students to recognize that connect early on, if, not like years later, hopefully.
Well, that's where the problem-based education comes in. If you actually do work on real problems, and since a real problem can't be done in 10 or 12 or 15 weeks, I recommend doing a problem that takes several years. Uh, and the class simply works on it. And then when the class is over, they haven't finished the problem. But but the next class that comes in starts where the previous class left off. Because actually, that's also the way industry often works. Very seldom, in universities, we almost always start from nothing and you have to do everything. But in industry, almost always you start with an existing product or an existing idea or a system, and your job is to improve it, make it better, modernize it, whatever. I think I've gone back and forth between industry and academics, and I found that very valuable. When I first went into industry, I thought I knew about all the stuff that was going to be needed. And it turned out that a lot of what I knew was irrelevant, made no difference. And periodically people would ask me, oh, we have this problem here. So tell us what the answer is. And I would say, oh, we never thought of studying that. And so what I've learned is that going back and forth is very useful because a university is supposed to come out with is supposed to think deeply about the knowledge and about the systems and to put it all together in a meaningful way. But when you go to industry, your job is to actually produce things, and you don't really have much time to think. And so but it's important to teach your students how they can master, how they can how they can survive when they go to industry when there isn't time. When somebody asks you a question about how to do something, they don't want you to say, oh, I'll go and do an experiment or I'll go read about it. They want the answer. And, if you say it'll take me some time, they'll say, okay, how about tomorrow? Give me the answer tomorrow. And that's not how academics work, but that's essentially how industry works. But in understanding that means that, well, wait a minute, industry doesn't need the correct answer. Academics have to find the absolute best, ideal, correct answer. An industry simply has to be better than what we're doing now. And so it's much easier to come up with an approximation that works quickly, that you can think of quickly from your theories, that you can apply almost immediately, and that's quite acceptable.
I want to ask Don a question. Do you see how is design education in the US evolving? Do you see any changes in the recent past post Gen AI?
Oh, well, I'm working on it. I do think there are changes. I think one very powerful thing that happened was many designers don't like it, but the David Kelly and his band of troops at IDEO and the D School at Stanford started to popularize design thinking. And at first, most of my academic friends were really pissed off. They said, we've been doing design thinking for 50 years, 100 years. What do you mean you invented design thinking? And second, they made it into something, oh, come and take our weekend course and you'll learn how to be a designer. And but it turns out the calling that you were doing design thinking was very powerful because it made people realize that design thinking can be applied to anything, and that designers can therefore be called in to solve many, many different areas of issues. But the other problem we face, though, is that so many people now have taken these design thinking courses, and they love it. It's fun. It's wonderful. But it's only a very small part of what design is about. And therefore, there's a lot of misunderstanding about the role of design. But in fact, the people at IDEO, they don't do what they teach because what they teach is the fun part. And that, even when they do the same things, it's they have a rigid schedule and they have certain constraints they have to meet and so on. And there's at least one famous video where David Kelly was watching them all do this, and at one point he said, "Okay, stop, time to move on." And And the moderator of the video said, well, wait a minute, I thought that the whole point was you have to continue till they finish. And he said, sometimes you need adult supervision. And so, but I do see schools more and more going now. Well, for example, this book has been very popular in the schools because it's talking about the use of design for societal good. It's called Design for a Better World, Meaningful, Sustainable, Humanity-Centered. And I'm trying to move away, and I say the economic system we follow is wrong. And I'm saying a lot of the tools we do are wrong. And that we are destroying the environment. But in order to change, there's something called the circular economy, which is a better way of manufacturing and doing things. But if you work for a company and you say, oh, we're not following the circular economy, we're doing it wrong, you can't tell your bosses that. They don't want to hear that. And I tell people, please don't go and tell your bosses that they're doing things wrong. Because when I was an executive, I didn't want people to come and tell me that. It isn't that I didn't want to know. I do need to know what's right and what's wrong and what we're doing. But I want you to come and tell me the answer. Now, if you want to tell people the answer, you can't say you must do the circular economy. No, you got to show me how to do it. And wait a minute, we make our money by making new products and selling them. And the products, every 2 or 3 years, people buy a new one, and a new one, or a new one. And when you do the circular economy, that doesn't work anymore. So how are we going to stay in business? So you better have an answer to that. And so that's why designers have to know much more about the world and about the world of business and about the world of politics. Every difficult problem ends up being a political problem. And if you're working in communities and trying to help a community get a better school system, educational system, hospital, healthcare, water supply, sewerage system, electric, all of that ends up being political because it's going to harm some things. It's going to cost money, which might be, and money is not an infinite supply. If you use money for one thing that's good, it takes away money from something else that's also good. And so here we go again, back to the question, but as a designer, how can I handle all of these different things? Well, first of all, you have a team. So it isn't one person who has to be an expert at everything. It's the team that has to be an expert. And the team has to learn how to work together and how to collaborate. But that's what politics is about. The good side of politics is when the different people have different opinions. And if you actually look at them, you can see each of those opinions is actually correct from their point of view. But each of them are looking at the world with different points of view. And you have to figure out how to work with that. And that's true in almost every discipline. And I think designers are well equipped to be leaders in this if we understand more about how the world works. Because designers don't have any specific knowledge. That's a good thing. So we're not stuck saying, here's how we do mechanics, or here's how we do electrical engineering, or here's how we do circuit design, or here's how we do this. They're not expert at any of that. But what designers are expert at is their methods. And we have to do is bring in the specialists, the people who are experts, and use their knowledge to put together whatever it is we're trying to create.
Thanks, Don. I think just another, sorry, Rich, I keep asking questions. So the circular economy you mentioned, is it connected to this book called Design for the Pluriverse by Escobar? We Design for the Pluriverse. Escobar, for others in the audience.
No, it's so actually in the writing of this book, I met every week for like 2-3 years with a group of people, and one of them was Escobar, Arturo Escobar.
Okay. So,
so I learned a lot from him, but that's different than this. What he was really talking about different cultures have very different ways of living, and we should allow that and encourage that. There's a well-known philosopher, though, who said, in fact, I have his name right here, Karl Popper. Popper. He said, the problem is that if you want to have a tolerant society where you're tolerant of all different ways of living, you have to be intolerant of those who are intolerant. Some societies think that what they do is right and everybody else is wrong and we must destroy everybody else. No, we can't live with that. But other than that, if people believe in living one way and someone believes in living the other way and they don't interfere with each other, why not help them? Help them continue to live the way they have learned to live.
Thank you, Norm. Yep, I will get that book. This sounds promising. Over to you, Richard.
Do you have any comments on what the other two have already mentioned?
No, I think fine. I see we are over time, but
Yeah.
if still time permits, if I have your permission, I had one small question for Dawn.
So,
Can I?
sure. Yeah, please.
All right. Right. My question is around industry and innovation itself. There's a thing that people say in the Indian industry is that we don't innovate. We just copy what is happening in the West. But West seems to be innovating pretty well. So what do you think is wrong at India? And how do you think we can work towards being more innovative? I know it's a very broad question, but I would definitely want to know your thoughts on this, Don.
Well, first of all, India does innovate. I mean, one of the largest systems ever built was innovative, Aadhaar. The system that's used for monetary purposes. That's what it was
UPI.
designed for. Yes. And which you used, which allowed you to bypass all sorts of middlemen and middle complexity and corruption in passage of money from the government to the end people. That was very innovative and a very difficult technical issue as well, because it had to be a system that would work on 1.5 billion people. And but here's I think the biggest flaw about in some countries that don't innovate well. Failure. If you really are going to innovate, you will fail frequently. In fact, I look at designers and I say, if you haven't had some big failures, that means you haven't been trying hard enough. And back to David Kelly of IDEO, one of the things I'm so happy with, I was in his office one day and he said, hey, Don, I want to show you something. And he went off and got something and he brought it to me. He said, here's a telephone that I designed. Look at it. How could I have been so stupid? Nobody can use it. It's crazy. And he was proud of it because if you think of something that's really new and a different way of doing things, it may fail. It may not be working. It may not work. But in that failure, you're going to learn a lot. And instead of calling these failures, we ought to call them learning events. We learn from them. But we have to encourage that. And in the school system, if people are working on a project and it isn't working, if they do it right, and suppose it's a term project, and so at the end, the projects are all demonstrated, and this one just didn't work. If they really did a really good job of trying hard, and if maybe they made something that actually did work, it just wasn't what they wanted or wasn't useful or whatever, they should get a high grade. Especially if they themselves point out the failures and what they've learned from it, that we went down the wrong path, or it's I was just reading a couple of articles about failure, in fact, and the people at Amazon brought out a tablet a number of years ago, and it completely failed. And when Jeff Bezos was asked, well, how do you account for that failure? He said, oh, that cost us about 90 million US dollars. He said, but you know what? We're working on things today that will be even bigger failures. And has that company failed? No. And he points out that because we encourage our people to take these risks and to do these things, what we also encourage them to learn from what they've done. And that's why the company grows so fast and so quickly. But when I was in Bangalore, we talked about that. And I was about to hold a conference, which I had in November, this past November, where I wanted to bring in people who did work in societies. And I wanted them to tell us about the work they've done. And I wanted, but not the work that succeeded. I wanted the Aga Khan Foundation to stand up and say, here's what we've done in the school systems. And it didn't work. It failed. So first of all, I wanted the audience to hear a respected, well-established group say they have had failures. But second of all, I wanted them to say what they learned from that failure and what lessons they are going to be doing, following in the future. Well, when I was in Bangalore, we talked about that, and there's a group that evidently has a conference called the Mistakes Conference. But I was told that the Indian government refused to attend it, and the United Nations refused to attend it. Why should we go to a conference where you glorify failures? Well, it's that attitude that stops innovation.
Thanks, Don. I think that's wonderful to hear that.
Yeah. That's really good to know. And I agree with what Don you've mentioned. And actually, I was reading recently about, psychology behind failure for some reason. And because me and my husband were also talking about like why the risk appetite, generally speaking, in Indian, companies or startups, or as compared to US, for example, is slightly lesser, and that's also translates into risk appetite for innovation, right? So we kind of thought that, and I also read about it. Most of the people who are employed in good companies at good higher posts, they have been like toppers in schools throughout, gone to good colleges, topped JEE or all of these entrance examinations. So most of the people, particularly in India, because who are working in those teams, are top 1% creamy layer of intelligent people who have hardly seen failure in their academic lives throughout.
Well,
So
that's not true in the United States.
yeah,
Let me
that's
tell
what.
you,
And that's not
major
true in the United States. There
major
are,
CEOs, they
yes,
might have majored in, I don't
yes.
know, literature
There
or
are many
and
school dropouts. There are many college dropouts who have, went on to become, multi-billionaires, open big companies, which is so far not true in Indian. There are many unicorns. There may
no, there
more.
are some.
No, I disagree there, Richa. We are only focusing on the tech world. When you talk about these examples, there are numerous millions of entrepreneurs who have made it big with zero formal education, built businesses
Yeah.
that span centuries, right? So it is, I think the fundamental difficulty we have is we have all been seduced by technology at all levels. And so our worldview is now shaped by tech first.
Hmm.
And I think we need to address that problem rather than, and when you address that problem, when we value humanities, when we value a professor of sociology as well as some Google,
Yes,
some tech CEO, then we will have a change in our cultural view of what is important. Studying people, their lives is more
humans.
important than building a passing technology which will disappear in 10 years, right? But
That's true.
humanity hopefully will continue and thrive.
And I
By
think
the way,
design
I
and
have argued.
design places an emphasis on understanding humans, and it's bringing those aspects of psychologists and linguists and all of those people back in the limelight. Yeah, I'm
So I
sorry.
am against STEM education.
Mhm.
STEM is very popular in the world. It's
Yes.
science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and I'm well trained in all of that. But
Yeah.
it's missing. There's nothing about people, nothing
Mm.
about history, nothing about the humanities, about arts, and they all come together. Now, actually, one interesting thing that's happening with the new large scale language models and deep learning neural networks, anybody can use it. I mean, I was just talking to, actually, it was my daughter-in-law who, in her job, was told she had to start using AI and teaching others to use it. And she said, "But I don't know anything about technology." So I simply opened up my laptop and had her have a conversation with one of the new Chat GPT. And you don't have to know anything about technology.
Yes.
You simply explain what you're looking for, and when it comes back, and you say, "No, that isn't quite what I meant," and you discuss, and you have this nice conversation back and forth. And first of all, it's going to diminish the requirement that you're a technologist. Second of all, it suddenly opens up other issues, ethics. How did you train this? Where did you get the material? You mean you stole it from authors and from painters and from other people? And second of all, is this going to do any harm to society? What if you thought it through? And guess what? Suddenly the humanities becomes more important than ever before. And the technology, yes, you need unbelievably high quality mathematics and programming skills to build these things, but nobody knows how they work. I mean, we build it. We know exactly the mechanism underneath that does things, but when it's learning, it's setting up weights, numerical weighting on trillions of locations. And so the combination is what is powerful, and there's no way of figuring it out. In fact, neural nets at first were going to help us understand the brain. But now it turns out, yeah, it does work a little bit like the brain, but it's it's just as hard to understand as it is to understand the brain. It didn't do us any good. But what I'm getting at is it is also going to bring to the fore humanitarian problems. And a lot of these fields that we're neglecting because we keep emphasizing STEM are going to turn out to be the important fields. And that's why good CEOs of major companies, technology and non-technology, are people who understand all of these fields, humanities.
Humanities, yes. So I think that kind of sums up our discussion, and I would like to just ask a closing question. So to our panelists. So as thought leaders in design, what excites you the most about the future of design and what worries you? So this is also a question from one of the participants.
So what I would do is I will reverse the ordering. I'll be last.
Okay.
In that case, I think, am I supposed to go first then?
Yeah, please.
What excites me is I feel there's a lot to do. There's a lot of work to do, which we haven't. Since this panel was about Indian context, I see a lot of work which needs to be done. So that excites me. Hopefully, I'll get to do some of them. What scares me, honestly, I haven't thought much about what scares me. Maybe at this point, I don't know enough to know what would scare me. Let me hear
Worries
from the
you.
other panelists.
What
Worries me. Worries me. And I can't think of anything major, but I'm sure that's my limited visibility or vision into the future. Let's hear from the other panelists.
Yeah, what worries me a lot is equity. Equitable use of technology has become worse and worse. With every new technology, we are making things worse than before. But what encourages me is that the same tool, the generative AI, has the power to bring this benefit to peoples and cultures in different languages. And at MSR and many other places, we're looking at how can we create Indic language generative AI, where people can interact in their own languages. It's a very hard problem, but people are now recognizing that we need to use this power to reduce inequity. And that recognition itself is what gives me optimism, even though we're very far away from straightening this imbalance of benefits of technology.
Maybe I could add a bit about worry that I just thought. Since I said there's a lot to do, and once you try to do a lot of things, you may end up doing a few things not right, and that may have adverse and irreversible effect on things around you, maybe the environment and the world. So maybe that's something that bothers me, or we all should be careful about.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you know what inspires me is the number of times in the last year or two that I've been involved with people having exactly these kinds of conversations like we have just had. And I find that all around the world, there are people who are very much concerned about the nature of the world or the current world. And the two major themes, and they're closely related, are the economic structure that we follow and the power structure that politics has followed. But they're related. And the economic system, the basic tenet of the way that capitalism has turned out. Capitalism was not meant to be the way it is, by the way. But it has turned out that it's now enriching the rich and making more poor the poor. And the emphasis is on profit and not on, as I said earlier, quality of life or even maintaining life in this world, because it's always on short-term benefits rather than long-term. And I think we have to change that. And again, there are many people, including many major economists, who are trying to change it. But the tools of economics are completely wrong. They're all based on simple mathematics, usually linear mathematics, which means you have to make gross oversimplifications. Economists do not understand human behavior, even though they put them into their models. They assume people are rational, which they aren't. They assume people have access to huge amounts of knowledge, which even if we did, we wouldn't be able to use it. But there are new areas of mathematics, of economics. I'm reading a wonderful book now about living with chaos, which is by a world leader in economics, although he's kind of alone, in doing new kinds of models of economic systems in which he doesn't use mathematics. It's a computer model. It's an agent-based simulation where he actually tries to simulate the basic behavior of people and families and groups, but hundreds of thousands of them in the simulation, because today's computer tools let us do that, which according to the book and the reviews that I've read, are so much more accurate than what traditional economics teaches us. Because the traditional economics the mathematics is still complex, but they've oversimplified what they do dramatically. But once again, I'm encouraged by how many people are concerned about these issues and talking about them, and even in many cases doing something about it. Am I worried about it? Yes, I think some of the new technologies we are developing can be very dangerous. We're getting to do autonomous machines that can work by themselves, that can taxis that can you don't require people to drive them, that are already in use in a number of cities in the United States, and I've taken them. They're very good. But that, first of all, takes away jobs from a lot of people. In fact, immigrants, one of the standard jobs of immigrants is to be a taxi driver. And that will go away if it's done by machines. But once we have machines that can work by themselves, think about what happens in warfare. We'll have machines that are making decisions and killing others, Now, if machines are simply killing other machines, well, maybe that's okay, but they won't be. They won't restrict themselves to that. And there's some real danger about how this might develop. Once again, there are really good thinkers who understand this and are working on it, but they don't know the solutions, because in order to prevent this, every single nation in the world, including non-nations, including guerrilla groups and dissatisfied populations who have access to these intelligent devices, they have to agree not to use them. And that's very, very, nobody knows how to solve that problem. So there are major issues coming. And of course, we're going to have another bunch of major issues simply because climate change is already here. It's already causing havoc all across the world, and we still are not reacting. And so there's going to be a lot of harm, which means that there's going to be a lot of displaced people. More and more people are going to have to leave from their homes, or maybe even move into other countries. And already we've seen that countries are rebelling. That it used to be countries that used to encourage immigration into the country. Now they're stopping it because when it was 10,000 people or 100,000, they could manage. But today it's in the millions. So the political tensions are also rising. So on the one hand, I have a lot of hope. On the other hand, I can see potential dangers. But again, back to my hope, I know of most of these dangers because people have written about it and talked about it, and I learned from them, and which gives me hope that people are worried about it. And so I'm doing my little thing. Mainly, I have my own charity trying to get people to do good societal things. In fact, we gave a number of our prizes to people in India, people in Ghana and India and South America, all around the world. But that's just one of the many, that's a small thing. And in order to change the world, we're going to need, well, the United Nations puts it this way. They have a list of 16 societal issues that we have to work on. But they have number 17, which is each of these problems is so big that they can't be solved by individuals. They have to be solved by all of us grouping together.
I totally agree with you, Don. And with that, we would love to continue, discussing because I think all three of the panelists and myself, we are enjoying this conversation a lot. But I think we've already overflown by half an hour beyond our plan. We will not hold you more. So I would just like to close the session with a note of thanks.
So thank you. I've enjoyed having the three of you. So the four of us, I think, have had a
Thank you so much.
really interesting conversation.
Thank you so much, Don. It's a pleasure, Saptarshi and Richard. Thank you very much.
Thank
It
you.
was an absolute pleasure and an honor to share the stage with all of you folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Don. Thank you all for sharing all your valuable insights and contributions to the design field and sharing your experiences and vision for the future and all your thought-provoking ideas. I think we had close to 200 listeners today and who I think enjoyed and the conversation and all of these thought-provoking domains about climate change, about how this misuse of technology can affect our future. I think it is important that young engineers and innovators and designers are aware of all of these aspects of design as well. And alongside being hopeful and energetic and excited about the future, looking forward to more such interactions with you, Dawn, in the future. And Saptarishi, of course, you are joining us for the main event also. And Manohar, please do join us for the main event as well. And thank you all. Thank you to all the participants for joining the meeting today and making this event a success. And thank you, Don, again for taking out the time and enlightening us with your thoughts.
Thank you. But one more thing before we quit. Don't quit until I'm trying to remember how we do it on Zoom. I want to save the chat. There looks like there's long, interesting discussions on chat. How do I download it? I've done it in the past.
So I will request the team, the organizing team. They will have a copy of that and they can share it with you.
Well, not the way chat works. You have to download it? That's been my experience. And there's a simple way, except every time I look at chat, they've changed it.
Well,
so I can't find the thing that says download. It says hide chat, screenshot.
Yeah,
We
so
have saved the chat, sir. Okay, so Pixel Design has sent a note saying we shaped
Yes,
it.
so the
Thank you.
1Pixel design team, they have, because I think only the host can do that. So they have logged in as host, so they can do that. And we will share the chat with you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. That will be very helpful. Thank you. Thanks, Don.
Thank
So
you.
thank you.
Thank you,
So
everyone.
Thank you for
I will
hosting.
say good night for me and good
Yes.
morning for you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.